Hello, I'm the 10-minute English teacher. Let's get you exam ready. Today we're thinking about A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and I'm going to be providing you with a summary and guide to Stave 2. Before we get going, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are plenty of things on the channel to help you with English language and English literature. Let's get you exam ready. Okay, Stave 2. In front of you now are 8 key images. By the end of our time together, you should be able to explain what happens in all of the significant moments of Stave 2. And it starts with Scrooge meeting the ghost of Christmas past. Light radiates from this spirit and it looks like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man. And then Scrooge is taken to school where he grew up. He sees an image of his former self and a tear appears on his cheek. Scrooge sees himself as a child, the last to leave a boarding school at Christmas, and he's very lonely and very unhappy. Scrooge is then shown his sister Fan, so she arrives to meet him as he prepares to be taken home in a carriage. The ghost of Christmas past reminds Scrooge of her passing and having had one son before she died, Fred. Scrooge is then shown his time as an apprentice for somebody called Fezziwig, and it's Christmas and a ball is being thrown for all of his workers and the locals. So the vision makes Scrooge think about his clerk, Bob Cratchit. Scrooge then argues with the ghost. The ghost, trolling Scrooge, suggests that those enjoying the party are fools for taking pleasure in something so small. Scrooge is heated by the remark and argues in Fezziwig's defence, realising how he can affect others, which leads him to thinking of Bob Cratchit. We then see Scrooge getting dumped. He's taken forward in time to a vision of his fiancée Belle leaving him. Scrooge has become too driven by greed and wealth and has become a different person, so she decides to leave. This vision is torture to Scrooge. There is one final vision before the end of Stave 2, and he's taken forward in time again to see Belle, and she's now married with children. She jests with her husband about Scrooge, who sat alone in his counting house while his partner, Jacob Marley, dies on his deathbed. And this leads us to the very end of Stave 2. Scrooge is starting to change, but has yet to fully change. The visions, however, are too much to bear, and he struggles with the ghost of Christmas past. Scrooge forces its cap down upon it and then falls into a deep sleep, setting up the next visit and more rising action in the narrative. So there are those key images. At this point, you should be able to explain what each one of them corresponds to. Maybe, if you want to, write a couple of sentences about those key moments to show that you understand your way around Stave 2 from start to finish. And if you're confident with that, let's think about some quotes to know. Okay, so we've got the ghost of Christmas past. Like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man. And from the cap of the ghost of Christmas past emanates a bright, clear jet of light, which is worth knowing because darkness and light is a key opposition in the novella. We've also got Scrooge taken to school. He is a solitary child neglected by his friends, left there still, and that's something that makes us feel a little bit of empathy for Scrooge. We start to sympathise with him, and that's a moment that elicits pathos. We've got Scrooge seeing his sister Fan, always a delicate creature whom a breath could have withered, said the ghost. And the use of withered there is quite interesting because that's used later on for a description of Tiny Tim. Scrooge arguing with the ghost about Fezziwig and his role, and he says the happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. So that does show that Scrooge is starting to become a different character. And at Fezziwig's ball, he says, I should like to say a word to my clerk just now, that's all, thinking about Bob Cratchit. And then when he meets Belle, she says, another idol has displaced me. And she goes on to say that it's a golden one. The use of idol there is interesting because that's one of the 10 commandments is not to worship false idols. Scrooge is a worshipper of money, and that alludes to the idea of consequences in the afterlife. And then Scrooge says, why do you delight to torture me so, to the ghost when he's seeing those visions of Belle. So if you want to take it further from here, you could think about which key quotes you can relate to key moments in the stave. Otherwise, we're going to head off. But here are some of those key quotes. One thing you could do if you want to is pause here and see if you can fill the gaps in. Now let's think about analysis. So we've got pathos. Dickens uses pathos, which is a literary word for sadness, to change the way we view Scrooge in Stave 2. The vision of Scrooge as a lonely child and possibly the victim of abuse at his school makes us empathise with Scrooge. Dickens wouldn't have got away with saying that his teachers were either physically or sexually abusing Scrooge, but there is a very subtle hint that may have taken place where Scrooge is very fearful of touching the hand of his teacher at the end of term as he leaves the school. So Dickens is beginning to direct the readers to want Scrooge to change and find redemption. After all, he was writing to change the attitudes of the middle classes. So we're hoping that Scrooge is going to become a dynamic character that changes rather than one that suffers his downfall. As far as the context is concerned, we know that Charles Dickens' parents were unable to repay their creditors and were sent to Marshalsea debtors' prison, with young Charles sent to a blacking factory at the age of 12. In his writing, Charles Dickens placed a special emphasis on childhood, possibly as the result of the events that affected him as a child. In A Christmas Carol, he uses childhood to elicit pathos in the reader, to encourage them to reconsider their attitudes to society. Fan could easily be withered, which is used in relation to Tiny Tim later on, which makes children seem vulnerable and in need of protection. We've got darkness versus light again in this stave. So Scrooge faces suffering in the afterlife unless he finds redemption. The idea in the narrative is symbolised by the opposition of darkness and light. The symbolism of light and darkness reoccurs throughout the novella. The Ghost of Christmas Past emits light, which reflects the idea of redemption. And we've got aspects of tragedy to think about, anagnorisis and peripeteia. In Stave 1, the readers are directed to want the peripeteia for Scrooge. So we want to see his downfall based on those descriptions and the way that he behaves in chapter 1, Stave 1. But then we start to now begin to relate to Scrooge a little bit more. The pathos makes us hope for anagnorisis over peripeteia. So we're hoping that he's going to have a realisation and change. And we can see that change beginning to take shape in Stave 2. Okay, check out the other videos on my channel. I'll continue to add content. Feel free to ask for something you'd like to see me cover in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share, and keep revising.